guess I'm live. I'm still working out the bugs on how to do all this fun stuff. So let's see now. Do 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 do. Anyway, how you doing, guys? If anybody's actually going to pay attention to this, I have no idea. Amen. Up in it. If you do, then I'm sorry. I'm basically just trying to kind of get used to this format. Obviously, this is not used to this. Well, anyway. I know. Watching this knocking under. This would be just completely, absolutely just fine. It happens. This kind of stuff makes me feel old as fuck. Technology, I don't know how to work it. Let's see. Is there a thing here? Is it a thing? Yeah. I'm still trying to figure all this out. So, bear with all this boring shit. Like the silence. Okay. Okay. I think I'm figuring this shit out now. Well, okay. Why not? Well, anyway, as a real quick test, if you haven't noticed by my videos, and if you see this, if you haven't noticed by the few videos I have actually loaded, and if you've seen my name in certain comment sections, you'll understand that I take issue with vegans. Not so much their choice to be a vegan, but just in general their attitudes or how. And YouTube vegans are probably some of the worst examples, but not the worst. They're the best examples of typical vegan stereotypes. They have one script. They rarely deviate from it. And it's really funny. When you try flipping the script on them, they don't know how to react. They don't. And I personally think that's funny as fuck. Now, I found that when you have a discussion with a vegan, you're technically not really having a discussion. what you're doing is going through an interrogation process. And anyone who's ever confronted, you know, an internet vegan in a comment section, or in some cases, in a live, uh, setting, like a live stream or something like that, you'll notice that it's always the non-vegan who's being asked questions, who are the ones being interrogated. And it usually ends up being to where all the vegans really trying to do, most of the time, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to be vegan. They can't help themselves. I mean, at all. It's exceedingly hard for them not to. You're not gonna find one. It's really hard to find one that just sits there and says, "Oh well, hey, you eat meat, cool, all right, that's your choice." No, no. They're gonna tell you how wrong you are for doing it, and they're gonna sit there and try to use. They're gonna basically try to how to put it, custom fit your morals, and lead you down the path of veganism. Okay, doesn't matter if, I mean, for some people it might work. I mean, no, it doesn't. That kind of shit doesn't, because I view vegans in the same light that I view Mormons, same light I view Scientologists or flat earthers or feminists. It's the same thing. They have a script. They follow that script. They don't they don't deviate from the script unless they eventually either drop out of the movement, air quotes included, or they get deprogrammed, for lack of a better term. and the bad part is they see everybody else as being brainwashed. They see everybody as being addicted to meat. They see it as, and they have to give a negative connotation to it, because otherwise they're not the good guys. And they really, 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 really think they're the good guys. Not understanding that there are no good guys in this. There are no bad guys in this. It just really is what it is. Now, I can't stand the idea of the vegan utopia, or any utopia for that matter, because one, utopias don't exist. It's an impossibility unless you have literally a one-dimensional society. Everyone is just your identical clone, all think alike. And that just doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen, because people should have the ability to make the decisions that they want to make, based off of their own personal preferences and things like that. And of course, the problem is that when vegans hear, "Oh, well, morality is subjective," and many of the things that someone who argues against vegan say is it is personal preferences, it's personal choices, it's subjective morality, it's a subjective viewpoint on morality and all these things, and they hear, well, you just want to do whatever the fuck you want to do without any consequences. And that's not how that works. It really isn't. Because in order for a society to function, every individual has to, in some form, kind of respect others in that society in order to cooperate. There has to be some form of cooperation. It's a two-way street. I don't kill you, therefore you really probably shouldn't kill me. Vice versa. I don't have any problem with you. You shouldn't have a problem with me. That is human morality in a nutshell. I mean, in all honesty, and we do these things. Morality, it's a word. It really is. It's a label that we use to kind of describe what's going through our heads. What's going through our heads is has more to do with what we are as opposed to who we are. Every species on this planet, every individual species has some kind of cooperation within that species, or else that it doesn't survive. You know, if there's constant conflict, then there's no viable way for it to actually exist. In order to do that, we have coping mechanisms that are deeply ingrained within our DNA, within ourselves, within our biology, excuse me, that pushes us to want to be nice to each other. Now, we're not nice to each other all the time, obviously. People do fucking kill each other. Animals do kill each other. You know, there's no way around that. There really isn't. But it's not everybody who's doing it. And you're not doing it to everyone all the time. You know, aggression in most cases is selective. For humans, we'll kill each other over all kinds of stupid shit. Animals will kill each other over mating preferences, or usually, you know, resources, you know, land and food, things like that, hunting areas, grazing areas. In mating, there, you know, there's usually not a whole lot of killing involved, but it does happen, and the animal's not going to give two shits. What happens? People, most of the time, give two shits. And I say a lot. That's just my brain processing shit. I can't help it. It happens. I'll try to keep it down, but I can't guarantee that'll happen. Depending on, just because there's a lag between brain and mouth. Now, with people, we'll assign motivations for things. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and we label it good and bad, right or wrong. And clearly, things that are detrimental to the continuance of the species, deliberate actions, we would pretty much say, yeah, those are probably not a good idea. Murder, not a good idea. Forcible violence upon another person, probably not a good idea. And you can categorize it all any which way you want. Still, not a good idea, because that starts a cascade of events that, without some kind of intervention, i.e., core systems, laws, things like that, could facilitate a kind of a spiral down into this. But I mean, human beings existed prior to even the idea of laws, things like that, because we had kind of group cooperation. This is obviously not unique, like I said, humans, but it is kind of species centric. You know, each species, all of those cooperative attributes, outside of a symbiotic relationship between two individual species, which is far more of a rare occurrence, or it's probably more. It probably happens more often than we think, but it's in a different form. But for the most part, each species cares about its own. That's supposed to I guess, not mean anything to a vegan, but in some ways it does, and it does in a weird way. And I was reading an interview with a farmer who was a former vegan, and obviously they didn't grow up vegan. They just decided in their tweens to that killing animals was, oh my god, it's so horrible to eat meat, blah blah blah. Anyway, once they grew up and figured out that everything their parents were telling them was pretty much on the money, they kind of dropped being a vegan, because it didn't make sense to be one, especially in light of what they were thinking. Now, vegans, the current flow of arguments that I've been seeing, and they've been around for quite a while, but they've been worded different ways. Oh, wait, hold on, give me one quick second. I need to do something. I'll be right back in a second. All right. Whew. Sorry about that. Again, I doubt anybody's really watching this, but hey, I don't give a shit. Whatever. Anyway, one of the things that uh, they uh, they kind of noticed something. Vegans pretty much put out there that there's no morally relevant difference between humans and non-humans, non-human animals, which is, I think, is sort of a strange notion, considering that, if that were true, and the author of the post put out there that, um, if there's no moral difference, if there's no difference in a moral fashion, if there's no morally relevant difference between animals and humans, why do we have any moral or ethical compulsion to protect animals at all? If we're no different, then why even bother? Right? If we're different, I mean, more on a morally relevant level. Just saying that we're different isn't enough. Saying, and if that's true, and if we're different, then how? I haven't gotten an answer for that yet. At least not one from a vegan. You ask anybody else, and they'll have a host of things that make us a bit different from animals, or at least in their perspective. Um, then when it also if humans are morally, if there's no morally relevant difference between humans and other animals, um, then kind of, logically we should be allowed to use them for our needs with zero limitations whatsoever. After all, no other animal but human beings intentionally respects any right of any other animal outside of their species. And this is true. Like I said before, other animals don't really give a shit about other animals, at least on any other level besides, can I eat it? Is it going to hurt me? And can I share this space without without the first two happening? Can I coexist in a non-violent manner that is somehow mutually beneficial? You know, that's about as far as any, what we would consider respect goes. But it's not really respect. It's a matter of survivability. And humans come into play. We respect not only our species, but in some cases, we respect members of other species. We respect their right to life, or their right to exist, or their, we go out of our way to not kill them. But why do we do that? We don't have to. And in most cases, if you really want to look at it, we don't, for the most part. There are a select few of us that do, but that's not the norm. I mean, for fuck's sakes, no houses would ever be built. No roads would ever be paved. No cities would ever emerge. Civilization as we know it would literally not exist if we deferred to other species, other animals, for our own actions. You know, if we cared as a species for other animal species to the level that most vegans do, crap on toast, we wouldn't even. Okay, in the vegan utopia, all right, animals would no longer be farmed. Animals would no longer be used for their eggs, their meat, their skin, the various myriad of things that we actually get from animals, specifically from animals. All that would just gone bye-bye. Okay? Any and all domesticated animals would be allowed to die out. Uh, it doesn't matter if it's gradual. It doesn't matter. And in fact, it would have to be encouraged. Because if you say, even if you, for we have what, billions of domesticated animals, right? We got like 9 billion, 3 billion, 3 billion, 3, I don't know. We have billions of domesticated animals, and it seems like a lot, but when you compare it to the hundred trillion, hundreds of the to the nth power trillion animals that exist on this planet, not counting insects, then they're minuscule at best. I crunched numbers. It was like it was 0.5%. Domesticated animals make up 0.5% of the actual animal population on this planet, not counting us at all. You count us, I'm pretty sure it's just a little bit less than that, but whatever. So, I mean, we're pretty fucking domesticated. Anyway, so even though it's a minuscule amount, those animals would have an impact. In Texas, one of the, one of the environmental hazards we've got here is wild boar. This is an animal that breeds well, breeds fast, and has uncontrolled behavior. They will keep breeding, and they will wreak environmental damage. This isn't where they're fucking from. So that there's nothing that can counter that. There's no. I'm gonna tell you right now, as humans, as we've settled in areas, we've killed off. We have a tendency to kill off every other predator that could potentially prey on us. We reduce their numbers to a staggeringly small degree. Now, in the vegan utopia, that would start tomorrow. Let's say it starts tomorrow. So many waves a wand, and say a century has passed, and we no longer farm animals, and we would have had it done one of two things. We would have stopped interfering in the breeding process, meaning that we would not help these animals become impregnated. And two, with not eating them, they wouldn't die. They wouldn't die in the numbers that we're killing them in. Okay, so at any given point, there's this maybe 10 billion animals, domesticated animals, right? You take that 10 million. We stopped eating them. Okay, gravy. We stopped breeding them. All right, we stopped artificially breeding. Right? Now what? Because any intrusion on their reproductive rights would be very, very non-vegan. The animals can't exactly consent. So, I mean, that's an argument from vegans. Animals can't consent to being inseminated, so they can't consent against having their sexual organs removed. So if we can't do that because it's a violation of their reproductive rights, that means those billions and billions of animals will breed on their own. As they're breeding on their own, those billions will trickle into trillions because they lack they lack a predator to control their numbers. That's literally what happens in any unmolested ecosystem. You'll have, you've got to have some predator that keeps the prey or the prey animals in check. There has to be some way of doing that. Natural selection and all that jazz. It keeps these populations in check. So now there's no check on the population. We can't interfere because that would be violating the rights of those animals. They're not going to die off. That's the whole thing, is that with vegans, they thoroughly believe that, oh, well, all those animals that live today will die of old age. Somehow or another, they're not going to breed in between. which is the stupidest shit in the fucking world. It's again, and then if they say that, oh, well, we'll just put some in sanctuaries, gravy. What are you going to do with the rest of them? I mean, a sanctuary is, you can switch the term for prison. You're going to put them in a prison. They'll be stuck in an area where they cannot get out. They cannot be in their natural state. They cannot do what it is they'll naturally do. And they can't go away, settle somewhere else. So effectively, it isn't much different than a zoo. And I don't know too many vegans that love zoos. I'll hate them. They view them as prisons. Sanctuaries are not different. You can sit there and call it a zoo. It's the same thing. You can call it prison. It's the same thing. These all mean the same thing. It's a confinement facility or a confinement area. Does a concentration camp help you? Does an internment camp? Does it change? None of those change the effect of what it is. So how is that vegan? How is that not exploiting the animals in some form or another? How is that not harming them in some form or another? Technically, it wouldn't. It would be the same fucking thing. So, okay. Just say, for instance, we put them in their confinement facilities. We put them in their internment camps. We have these cow internment camps. We have these chicken internment camps. We have these pig internment camps. We have all these internment camps for these animals that we normally would, these domesticated animals that we would normally eat. We do this to, quote unquote, protect them from extinction or whatever. So, okay, what happens in 10 generations, 100 generations? What do we do then? We don't kill them. They have no natural, they're technically protected from natural predators in their confinement facilities. And one would think they're not putting them in cages, so they have free access to mate as much as they want. So again, what happens? 100 generations, 10, I mean, just even five generations of those animals, they go and their breeding goes unchecked. You don't have enough room in the sanctuary. You have to do one of two things: cull the numbers, or release them into the wild. You release them in the wild, they breed unchecked, so on and so forth. You get where this is going? So that aspect of the vegan utopia is not the most, but one of the most retarded things they've got, which is why proper animal husbandry is key. We bred these guys into existence. You can't unring the bell. Not killing them anymore will not save them from, or will not stop them from, then the numbers aren't going to decrease naturally. Now, okay, that aside, let's see, what else is the aspect? Okay, good. The other aspect to the vegan utopia is its complete and utter just, I'm not going to call it disdain, but just ignoring the rest of the wildlife. Okay? Because building roads, building a house, erecting cities, human advancement is technically vegan, since you're not generally exploiting animals or killing animals for food. You're not eating the animals. So, I mean, by all rights, intents, and purposes, by all definitions, it's vegan. So you could kill billions of animals. And they would have no problem with this because human advancement doesn't go against the vegan ideology. And if you replace cropland, the cropland that we normally use for feeding cattle and all that kind of stuff, you replace it for, more edible human crops, then we would still be doing all of the same environmental damage because this to sit there and say, oh, well, 7 billion people, we've got enough food. We can grow enough food for that. That's not real. that's not how that works. Because 7 billion becomes 10 billion, 10 billion becomes 20 billion, and so on and so forth. Especially if we're all extraordinarily health conscious, and if you listen to vegans, you live longer, much healthier, and I'm not even gonna lie. Some of them thoroughly believe that going vegan makes you somehow more potent. Right? So now we're living longer, able to breed more. What's left? So that means we'll have to expand our areas. We'll have to eventually farm more land to produce more crops. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, pound for pound, what we get from meat, the nutrients we do get from meat, pound for pound, are less than what we get from vegetables. Yes, it's true that because of the fact that we due to crop subsidies, that's another thing. So now, since we're not producing this vast amount of grain, this vast amount of corn, of soy, of alfalfa, we're not growing this to give to animals. There's no longer subsidies. There's no longer reasons to grow these very specific things for animals. So what's going to happen? There will be a sharp downturn for these farmers. They'll lose money, and because they lose money, many of them will stop doing it. Whatever thinks about this. If you no longer have a demand, you have no reason to have a supply. And with monocrops, the demand is artificially kind of it's encouraged through the use of subsidies, government subsidies. Farmers are given money to produce these crops that in turn go into countless items, but the majority of which goes to feeding animals. Now, because confinement facilities are an easy way to control where these animals are. It's a cheap, relatively cheap way to control these. But of course, they need food, and it's a handshake process. The government shakes the hand of the farmer by giving them money. The farmer grows all his food. And he shakes the hand of the person who raises the animals, like by selling the grain, all that kind of jazz. So it's that kind of process. It's fine, but you take that away. No longer are there subsidies. The consumer, the normal average consumer, doesn't purchase the bulk of these things. So that means that's a severe drop in income for these farmers. Now they have no reason. They've got nothing. They've got no encouragement to continue farming the way they're doing. They can go and do something else. So what happens? Now they're no longer farming. What's that do? That increases the price, because now we'll have larger demand but a limited supply, right? Because, you know, humans as a whole, if you listen to vegans, we don't require of uh, a lot of land to grow vegetables to sustain ourselves. So if we don't require a lot of land to sustain ourselves, all that kind of stuff, these giant industrialized farms, giant. I mean, we're talking the largest one is 500 million. Is 500 million acres? No, 500,000 acres. I forgot. I'd have to look it up, but it's a ridiculous size. And what do they grow? They grow corn one season, they grow soy the next. And I believe they'll grow the alfalfa as well. They each season they grow a giant monocrop, ones that can carry over from the previous yield. And 80% of that goes to animal feed, and the rest goes for the consumer in one form or another. Or at least that's what we're told. Now that it's no longer profitable, because there's not the lion's share of the demand for these products were the animal agriculture industry. If that doesn't exist, then those farmers, the growers of the crops, they no longer have an incentive to even bother. It's not enough. You know? So even if they did hold out, the prices of it would skyrocket. You know, if you think paying, you know, $2.50 a pound for tomatoes is is cheap, or is expensive, depending on how your budget is. Just imagine, you know, having to pay out, you know, steak prices. Go into, you know what? That's another thing. All the things I hear I hear from vegans that say, "Oh, it's real cheap to be a vegan." No, it's not. They say all you gotta do is eat rice and lentils, because rice and lentils are cheap. They are relatively inexpensive. You can buy a bag of dry beans, you know, for $1. You've got maybe a couple of days worth of food out of it. Maybe, if you really, really like beans a lot. You know. Yeah, those are inexpensive. Fresh fruits and vegetables are not. Not enough for when you're trying to maintain and what's normal for human function. There's a reason why even herbivores spend 90% of their waking hours eating. It's not, it doesn't take, you know, you can put two together. They spend all day eating food. Eating their particular food. Now, vegans will sit there and say, "Oh, well, you know, we have these processes that can change the things. Taking soybeans and making tofu, taking peas and isolating it for the pea protein, and yada, yada, yada." Still not a large enough demand on the farmers. Farmers would have had a large amount of product with a relatively small demand. That's why they're able to sell some things cheaper than others. By fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables are different than grains and you know, beans. Beans and grains, they're relatively easy to grow, relatively easy to process. Whereas fruits and vegetables, they don't yield as much. You're not going to see, you know, crop fields for tomatoes the size of what you see for soy, the size that you see for wheat. Same thing goes for every fruit and vegetable. You're not going to see the same thing. It just doesn't work that way. Fruits and vegetables, in and of themselves, take a toll on the environment. They require more nutrients to produce these things. These are what amount to basically, kind of like, I guess, offspring or some shit like that. Anyway, but when you take all that into account, utopia. All right, so now fruits, vegetables, maybe not, grains and beans. Those may not bump up in price. Corn will, wheat will, almost assuredly. Maybe not wheat. Maybe not wheat. A lot of wheat does go for but I mean, like corn, yeah, corn. Those 5 years of corn for $1 are not going to happen anymore. Because again, these no farmers being subsidized. Now, if you sit there and say, okay, well, what if we still subsidize the farmers? Where does that come from? It comes from taxpayers' dollars. Taxpayers have a vote on this. Blah blah blah. It might help. It probably won't in the long run because there still isn't enough demand, and the government isn't going to see. There's not going to be a kickback for the government for this. They could possibly do that, and if that ends up being, we're okay, fine. Then now the government is the one doing all of the farming, and where does that leave everybody else? That destroys the idea of a free market in agriculture. Some vegans wouldn't give a shit, but if they can do it to the agriculture, they can do it on other things too. And then next thing you know, you've got a communist nation or a socialist nation or some kind of basically a dictatorship in some form or another, and that's not good for you. So okay, all that aside, so now prices for basic food items go up. What does that leave us with? How do you control this? How do you stop people from eating? How do you even begin to implement this? Prohibition. Prohibition has never worked. Not really. Not for basics. Not for things that people really desire. Out and out, outright outlawing of a thing has never truly stopped it from ever happening. So there was prohibition on alcohol. That didn't fucking work. There was a prohibition on all drugs, all illegal drugs. Well, we made these drugs illegal. That actually has turned out not. It took a while. It took almost 100 years. But now that's going away too. You have what was something, like marijuana, a perfect example. It's an illicit drug. Some states, they're lifting the prohibition. So that didn't work. What else? How many other things? Prohibition's never happened. Or sorry, never been successful. Has never been successful. And never will be successful because human beings are individuals and no one wants to be told you can't have something when there is no viable reason not to have it. We still do it. We'll find ways to do it. What happens then? Okay, you can't eat animals. You can't kill them. You can't wear their leather. You can't do this. Can't do that. You know. All right. People will. You'll have those underground. I'd say underground killing facilities, for lack of a better term. You'll have all these, you know, black meat market. Does that sound right? Underground meat market. That sounds much better. You know, where there's no regulations. I mean, people don't believe that a lot of our facilities have regulations. They're kind of loose in some ways, as far as as far as the animal agriculture is concerned. Um, like, cows and pigs, they're supposed to have a relatively humane death. Um, Basically, they're supposed to be they're supposed to be inoculated with a bolt to the head. They're supposed to pretty much scramble their brains enough to where whenever their throat is slit, they don't feel it. Or in some cases, they're electrocuted. And these all sound very, very cruel, um, because the fact that doing it sounds much worse than it is. Killing the animal is not torturing it. If you torture the animal in order to kill it, that is different. There is a difference. The animal need not actually suffer at the moment of death. A bullet to the brain, that lights out almost instantaneously for almost every animal on the planet. I shoot you in the head. Doubt we're going to have issues with you later on. The death is almost instantaneous, and any residual, any pain that the body may have gone through isn't received. There's nothing to receive it. So the slicing of its throat is a moot point. It is no longer sentient at that juncture. So the killing, in essence, isn't the problem. It's the treatment prior. We can treat our animals better, sure. We can have better facilities. We could kind of do away with the confinement facility and just keep a butchering facility. There are farms that do that. There are places that do that, where the animals are not held at the place where they're being slaughtered, at least not for any amount of time. That would be relative to their lives. They're held there for at most, if they're doing a small scale, then they can grab them one by one from the field or some smaller enclosure. But they're not pictured like they are in those vegan documentaries, where every animal is pretty much in a just a tiny cage where they can't step 3 feet one way back. Are there places like that? Yes, obviously. Is that wrong? It's not ideal. If the animals could have, and there are places where they do have a better lifestyle, they're able to do what they would more or less have been doing for 10,000 years. Then that wouldn't be much of an issue. Joel Salatin, his method, the rotational pasture method, where basically they move the animals around harken back to the days of cattle rustling when the cattle drive and all that kind of shit. Where animals were shepherded from point A to point B. You know, literally like a shepherd in fields. That existed. And in some places it still exists. That makes sense. Go back to what worked prior to the 1920s. Confinement facilities got their start by complete accident in the 1920s. Some extra chickens on a farm. The bad part is it worked. It turned out to be profitable. So it caught on. And World War II, well, the World Wars kind of pushed them even further. The need for those facilities, well, the perceived need for those facilities. And they got a huge jump in the 1970s and 80s with government subsidies to the farming industry. You know, and now that's primarily how people want it done. Well, not want it done, but that's how it is. These facilities are usually tucked far away from major metropolises. Because after all, you wouldn't want a slaughterhouse in your city, even though at one point in time, certain cities had slaughterhouses in the middle of them. Chicago, New York, I'm pretty sure here in Texas, I think Houston had some stockyards. They don't do that no more. You know. So yeah, if that hadn't ever happened, we could probably reverse it. You know. I'll see why not. That's better than the alternative that vegans want. Still, that would still be killing animals. That would literally still be killing animals, or at the very least, put them in direct competition for land and resources with us. And in the end, in a them versus us, with the now wild, ex-domesticated animals, guess who wins? Guess who dies en masse? Progress. It's gonna be us. It would really be them. So, could we change to better animal husbandry? Yes. Could we treat the animals better? Yes. Do you need to be vegan to do this? Fuck no. Do you need to be vegan to give a shit about how animals are treated? Obviously, fucking no. Do you then have a reason to be vegan? No. Maybe in my next, if I do another live stream, I'll go into actually how vegans even came to be. And by mere accident of extra chickens, is why you have to deal with self-righteous, pompous, pseudo-religio bitches can't stand that Bambi and Charlotte are gonna die to put food on somebody's plate. Anyway, I'm the Bearded Devil. I will catch you guys next time. Anybody actually watches this after the fact, and kudos for you for dealing with my dumbass. All right. I'm out of here. Check you later, guys.